Hi everyone, welcome back into the studio. Well, today it's a beautiful, beautiful day out today, and then I'm gonna go fishing later, I think. But I'm going to paint this little fisherman here. It's been about a year since I've done one of these. I try to do 1 to 2 each year for you, for all my fishermen out there. And I came across this photo from Adobe Stock, and then I put him into this little river that I have. I love the colors on this rock that I want to put in. And I'm going to change up some of the trees. I'm just going to kind of create it with you as we get going, but I want to place this fisherman in there. I really like it. As a matter of fact, I have a fishing pack just like that, same colors. So anyway, so let's go into it. So what I have here is a 18 inches by 14 inch, 1/4 inch wood panel. And then I gave it 1 coat of the canvas prep medium. And then for the colors, I'm going to use my standard palette that I have out here. Some big brushes, old brushes. I'm going to do a very casual technique, kind of find my way through this. I'm going to add a few other things. I love the distance that a mountain adds, so I'm going to add one back there, just very simplistic. And let's get going. Let's see what we can do with this, okay? First thing is to start a sky. We've already started. Now, on my one that I have over there has probably a few too many clouds for me, so I'm going to start it out a little more simplistic. A little bit of phthalo blue and some white. We take this up value-wise. You know, I like to talk to you about the value and everything, to a lighter blue up around maybe an 8 or so here, so maybe even a little bit lighter yet. As a matter of fact, so I don't use up all of my white yet, I'm just going to push some of this in, because I'll use this into the water as well. So I'm just going to push in some white here. You could add a little bit of extender. I have some extender medium out here. You could also, I'm going to do this mostly acrylic, which means you know, not a whole lot of wet on wet stuff. I will use the extender, but you can also use some open medium, some of the Daravan open medium if you want. That will give you a longer working time. I want this sky slightly violet, so just a touch, tiny touch of the Quinacridone Violet into that. We'll push that over, and that'll be a good place. Nice light sky. We'll darken it here in just a minute with some phthalo. But I'll take my big brush and some of this color. I just added a touch of the extender to it, just so I like how extender makes the color slide over the surface. So that's what I like. But I want this right down in there. I want this real light blue. So I'm up around a value 8 or so. And I want to give this painting some paint. I want this to be just a nice thick painting, so I gave it some pretty heavy color there. Now, up in the top, up there, we'll get a little bit darker sky, so I'll just take some phthalo, maybe a bit of that quinacridone in there. I like the sky, you know, the sky when you look at it, and out here in Nebraska, it's beautiful because you get to really study the skies, because we're very flat and you can see forever. You know, you go a few hours in each direction, and you into the mountains, except for east, it's still Nebraska, but you get up into the Colorados, into the Rockies, and up in the Laramie Range, up in Wyoming and stuff, and you get beautiful mountains. But here you can see what the sky truly looks like, and you get this darker value up around a 5 or so up at the top, and then I just move this down like this, and that's all I want to do. Is just real simple little sky up there, maybe even just a touch darker. I like to move everything in little brush marks, movement here. This creates, you know, I don't like to take too long unless I'm just lifting the pressure and softening. I like movement like this because this creates the atmosphere in the sky that this makes a real interesting painting. So I'll rinse that out of the brush there for a second. And I'm going to do the majority of my painting with like a 3/4 inch brush. I want a large brush paint as much as possible. Of course, I'm not going to be able to paint him with that, but I do like the large brush and large brush landscapes and stuff wherever I can do it. Now, so we're going to bring light in this way, because he's going to be lit up on this side. This rock is going to be beautifully lit over here, shadow side over here. So as I go into these back mountains here, I'll just take some of this color that's here. The mountains, excuse me, will go a little more purpley color here, but they're also not a bright purple. Let's get some of that red violet in there. Not a bright purpley blue. So I'll add some, I'll get the blue, and then I'll add some of the burnt sienna to gray it off a bit. Here, this makes the mountains in the distance. That's good. That's a pretty color. Then I'll lighten it up. So this is what they're going to play against here, against the sky. So I'm going to look at it against the sky. I don't want it this dark. I want it, you know, almost as light or as dark, as you want to say, as that the top of the sky. But it's going to drive value darker. So take it lighter than what you think, even lighter yet than what you think. And let's just drop in a real casual set of like hills, mountains kind of here, right, like that. That's kind of neat. A little different back there. And then we'll just model our brush around. Let's even take some sky color here and move that into this. So we're painting impressionistic here, right? Just give some of this that right back there, right? And so light side, a little more of the, matter of fact, let's do this with the knife. You know, a lot of you always like the knife. The knife is fantastic. We just got to be careful, not too much interest with the knife. So let's just take some of this gray, a little bit of white. Maybe there's a little, maybe this is spring and there's a little snow up there. So we'll just push some of that interest back in there and let it model. See here, let it model on your palette here. And we'll just push some of that right in like that. Oh, I like that little bit of burnt sienna that hits the side. So over here to the dark, maybe a touch of burnt sienna in it. Model this in. Not completely dark, just model it up there. And we'll pull the darker, the impressions of the darker side of the mountain back there. Light coming from right, shadow coming from left. Let's just push an edge or so in here, right like that. And let some of this cross over, softening it. There we go. Maybe a bit more dark right back down in here. There's just a, you know, I just like to palette knife it in and let what happens happen in here. That's what gives the, you know, an interest to it. Now, I'm going to reset that one light because I hit it too much right here. So let's just reset some of that. Tap through. That's good. A bit of shadow. Bit of burnt sienna in it. There, like that. That makes a nice distant little mountain and a bit of the light. We could put some soft clouds back there, you know, if you want, and you can do just wispy clouds. Let's just take, and when I do the wispy clouds, you see it, I thin it out. I take my knife, some white, maybe a bit of this gray, just a bit of it, and thin it out with some extender. And we just whisper these on like this. Just big spring, summery clouds here. Summer, spring, wispy clouds. Back up to there, maybe a little bit heavier right back up over here. And I just let the transparency of it, you know, let the thickness of it to the transparency of it. So I'm pushing with my knife. And you know, that your surface is so important for this. This is one reason why I love the you know, using the canvas prep, because it gives me a beautiful surface that I can just do some of this with. You can wipe back, leave a few little, you know, burbles of the clouds there. Here, like that. Just a real pretty little sky. And maybe a bit heavier, not quite so much blue. So sometimes I'll just wipe my knife back, tap into a little bit of that light, a little bit of that gray right in there like that. And maybe a bit heavier the little gray right there above the mountain. You can take your soft brush, so you can soften that with a knife, or you can just pull through and soften some of that. I'll leave that bit of gray right there, but soften some of that with the edge of your brush here. That's, I kind of like that. Sometimes I'll flatten them out, which will help you with your distance there. So that gives you a better distance if you flatten it out, because it adds the linear perspective to that. So we'll add just a bit there. That's kind of neat, kind of distant there. Now this is drying a little darker than I wanted, so I'm going to lighten that up just a bit. Anytime you make a gray, that's a good thing to remember. Anytime you make a gray, it will usually dry a little darker. So you have to keep that kind of in mind here. The grays visually in acrylics dry a little darker here. There, that's better. I don't want that quite so pointed right there. I'll let that just kind of recede back there. Okay, so then we're going to start coming forward, and I really like in this photo, so we'll start to pull some of this gray and stuff here forward, right down here. Let's just grab some grays and some blues. We'll pull it forward, and then we'll work some of our other colors right into this. Let's just pull that right through. Just break up that just a bit. Soft little mountain. So right back to here, I love that. Oh, you can see it, but it has a real warm sense that's coming in on this side. So I'm going to pick up just take some siennas, some burnt sienna and some yellow oxide right into some of these grays. Lighten that up a bit. Makes a warmer color that is just kind of pretty back here for a rise of a little hill or something back there, another little mountain. Let's let some light and some gray come in there. Remember this, we get the light of the distance here. The distance is going to come by making it more atmospheric, so we'll keep that in mind. Here, we'll push a bit of that in there. So little hills, I love it out here in Nebraska and the prairies, and where the prairies meet the mountains, and we get some really pretty colors going through there. Let's take some of this brown, maybe a bit more of the burnt siennas right into this other gray, and add a bit of it right up into that mountain. So you don't have in the landscape, it's fine to do that where you have a quick change of colors. It does happen, but I like to blur these colors together. So I'll take a little bit of that color into that one here, right into that mountain. Especially if I'm painting for distance, I like those colors to change slowly, not quickly. And that will give you more distance. The key is atmosphere, but that'll give you a bit more distance. So I like that, and a bit of this slowly changing back there. This hills changing to the back. And then as I come forward here, of course, in the reference photo that I kind of found that I liked, it goes more into trees and stuff. So we'll do that. We put a bit of this color. And, like all the good things, when I'm just creating stuff, I always just kind of move stuff forward here. I like to move that stuff forward. So I think I want just a touch heavy. So a little more white and the blue and some extender right in there. I want this cloud just a little heavier right in there. A bit more of that horizontal movement here. That gives me more linear perspective going back. That's better. Maybe draw this one right up over that one there so that it almost joins together here. That's better. Okay, so we're going to come forward here now. Let's just keep working forward here. Let's start adding a bit of the greens burnt siennas and greens right up here. Softer. Bit of extender right into this. This is going to start to create some of our trees right along in here as we're coming forward. And as this dries, I'll watch my mountains and stuff here. I'll show you here how we can bring them back even more. But I want some trees up in here. So I just use this. This is the rough side of the brush. Just scumble it, move this around. We want to create this energy of trees and stuff here. So, and we'll get darker as we come forward. So I'll let some of this darkness start to come in here, and I'll change it, later on. Just this, you can see how I just pull across like this, and this is an impressionistic technique that's just wonderful. I just love it here. And I'll use the points and the corners. Remember we painted that large set of roses with the large brush and stuff, that lesson that we did a couple weeks ago? That is wonderful for learning how to paint some of this. Let's push just an idea of some of this back here. Just by adding it like that, you'll push the idea of some of those trees and stuff back there. Now, let me show you something here too, because I want just a touch more depth in there that blurs off just a bit there. So I'm going to go back to my real light blue and color here, real light, some extender into it, and I'm actually going to push the sky, and it's a little bit too dirty. I have just a little bit too much of the gray from that green and burnt sienna in there. So let's relighten this back up, get something a little bit cleaner here. And so I want to get this back up here to its, and you can see I step off so I don't get a mountain of paint here. Step off to the side. That's probably going to be good. Just a little bit cleaner. That's pretty. Of the blue. See, that will help pop this mountain forward. So this is negative painting. And landscape painters, floral painters, I did negative painting with you guys just the other day in another painting. I use negative painting all the time to help me push and pull objects within a painting here. So let's just grab a bit of this here, right through. There we go. Yeah, and see, it pops that mountain just a bit forward. And you can, always drop in and add just a touch more of the mountain color or something there if you want to bring it a little farther forward there. Just a bit of it. Not too much here. Just break some of those. I like to have little broken lines, little taps of, I call them the little sparks in landscapes and stuff. A little energy to it, just a little movement, and that just gives a viewer something, and their imagination fills it in, which works really well. So let's take that yellow burnt sienna. So even as I'm building forward, each time you put on a color, and this is something important to remember, guys, each time you put on a color, it changes the relationship of all other colors. So don't ever feel that once you get an area done, it's done. You're going to go back and work that area again as you add more colors forward. So, I end up doing that all the time. So let's just even take some of this real dark right in through here and add like a little idea of trees and stuff in there right now. So, and what I like to do as well, which I'm going to do up into the front there, is like take a little yellow, a little white. I'm going to do it right up here into the front, and I'll make that sun hit area on the side of this a little more white. Real light kind of yellow, not a bright yellow, but a lighter yellow. And I drag it like this and it makes it hit the sunset, like the highlights of the plains, a lighting area of a plane or something, and it gives that's where the sun is hitting it, and lights it up a bit. So, and then I'll push a little bit more yellow right next to it here, a little bit more yellow right next to that. Here, a little bit over there. Here we go. And we get just a little more distance in there. I wiped out my trees, so I get to add those again, So maybe a few little ideas of some of those greens there. Just little touches of that. Gives the impression of something like that there. Okay. So that we're setting that up here. Now this is going to be up there on that part is really in shadow. So first off, we're going to take some of our greens, burnt siennas, and then we'll take a touch of the blue here. And that burnt sienna is really important. Keeps it from getting too cold. And I'm going to use this right up in here. And I want this. See this real mottled color? I want to get rid of the holidays. That's the white that's in here. And I just want to tap this up to give some ideas of some of these trees. We'll go down towards the water's edge, maybe down into the water a little bit. Okay. Cross over your colors. Cross over. This will be rocks right up here in the front, but this will be trees and stuff as we go up here into the very back here. We'll give the idea of a back mountain there and some trees. Pretty solid in there, but a lot of movement. So sometimes I'll come in and take some of this movement with my paper towel. I'm looking for movements, some strong, what I call strong horizontals, strong verticals. A little bit darker here, burnt sienna green, right up into the very front shadow right here. There's so what we're doing is stair-stepping back, if that makes sense here. So we'll stair-step back here. That'll give us some areas. And so it's pulling everything here forward. Does that make sense? And then we'll take a few strikes of that right down into our water here. And right up, nice, dark, deep, right up over here by the rock, which will help this big rock that I want to paint there. And a smaller rock that's going to be right here. I actually painted it, and I shouldn't. So we'll take a smaller little rock right here, right back out, right there. That'll be good. I'll push some of the edging and stuff up there at the top. I want this other slightly lighter, maybe a light struck edge of a hill here coming down like this. So I want dark and light up there, and I'll just wipe it back. I like this. See this blurring of the color and the edges? That's what keeps a landscape really interesting. It's not a solid color. There are colors that are modeling through and stuff. The knife is magnificent for doing stuff like that. Let's get some light color right here. Some whites, lights, some of this. Model this through like this. And see, this could be, the light is going to be hitting some of the top right up here and pulling down into the shadow there. So, and that's why I really like that feeling of the light. I like, a good landscape painter controls the light within their painting. And that's what I'm going to try to do there. So it's going to be a light little hill following behind this shadow that picks up right up in the front up here. So we'll get green and blue and burnt sienna really kind of heavy right in here. This nice big deep shadow. We'll put some shadows of the trees. Maybe some of those trees will reach up towards the light there. Here. But another little hill right behind there. And then all of these pretty little trees and stuff will come right in here. Let's get this atmospheric trees colors. some tree colors, some atmospheric tree colors right back here. Maybe a little more blue-green and white. Not a bright blue-green. So when you're thinking about a blue-green, so there's a nice blue-green. We'll lighten it up. But then you think, what is the opposite of the blue-green, right? You go over there. It's more of an orange, heading towards an orange. So we'll add a little bit of that just to keep it from getting too, or you can add burnt sienna too. Blue and green, maybe a touch of burnt sienna and light. But you want a softer blue-green color, right? Here, just the edge of this, right in there, a little blue-green. Here. There we go. Push into some of those. It'll give us some cooler shadow trees, elements of those here. And blurry, right? And let's, a little bit of dark. Let's cross these. I like on that one how these kind of cross over a bit here. So we'll do that. I like crossing planes because that gives the viewer a really good feeling of depth here. So there we go, just like that. Little crossing planes, some horizontals and some vertical movements there. That makes it interesting. I'm going to go down in size of brush here to my 10 for just a second so I can just tap in a little warmer green. So I'll just add some yellow to that and I'll push a little bit more brighter yellow. Yellow oxide and white, just add it right to that so it's a little warmer. Let's go even a little warmer yet. A little bit more yellow. Right up into the front because this is across the river on the other side, and this might be light struck. So back on that back, it might be struck by by the shadow, and then we'll add a few little shadow marks here. Imagine little trees. You have light strike and shadow side. So that's what I'm imagining when I'm doing that. Light strike and shadow side. So this is the shadow side, right back there. We might have the angle of your brush. This is the other thing I want to, I've spoken to you guys a lot about the angle of your brush. Let's put a little burnt sienna in that. It's so important. So if I angle like this, I can give a little feeling of the land right there. Does that make sense? Let's put a little more light with it. Maybe even do it with a knife. I really love the knife. We'll model up some of the knife color. We'll push the edge here and just pull down like that and let that modeling just happen like that because that'll give you the feeling of the ground. And then take some of your shadow and just break the edge right in there. Pull down into that, breaking the edge. So that will create the interest of it. Now, I can create a tiny bit more light. Just a little bit more yellow, the light struck. I'm always thinking, where's the light hitting? So maybe right in here, there's a light struck area. The light is hitting again, right in there. Break the edge a bit, but pull that down right in there like that. And I love those little hits and strikes there. Like that. Pull down just a bit. Isn't that kind of pretty? So where's that light hitting? Let's get it just a little bit more. A little bit more yellow and white here. Maybe even a touch of our others, but mostly yellow oxide. Model it up. Nice thick paint and just pull a few marks right in there. There we go. That's that little hill right there. And yeah, pulling in maybe a touch of it right along the edge of the water. And then to really make it show up, you got to give it some shadow by it somewhere. And then it really starts to show up as light and dark. Does that make sense? So we'll break some of this here. little edges of bushes and trees and stuff. And maybe a nice deeper dark shadow right in there that will push this right around the corner. There, like that. And let's take just a bit of our light and tree colors right there. Just drag that right through. That will create a bit of the distance here. Got to be careful that we don't took out a little too much shadow, I think. So I just push it back in. I love the knife for this kind of stuff. And because it just applies it so casual. Here. There we go. Just like that. That's good. Maybe a little bit of the light hitting right up here onto these sides right there. A little bit of the green. There we go. And, you know, I do like to see like almost a sharp line of the shoreline there, or the hill right through. Not everywhere, but at least over some of it. I like to see that. That's good. Let's drag this little point right out here, like that. This other one sits in shadow, so even a little bit of blue into it over here, where it's going to go right around that corner. There. That's good. There, like that. Blur that off. Good. Let's soften this up the side because we'll have a few more little trees there. Maybe some of these reach up to the light, so they'll go more yellow. So some of the trees that are right here. So you think, as I'm painting that, I'm thinking trees and where the shadows and lights are, a little cooler right here onto the light shadow side. Some light strikes onto them. And do you want to do these as, you know, as pine trees or, you know, cottonwoods or whatever you want here? A little bit more, maybe it hits right up there. You know, just ideas of it. Just, boom, just hits the ideas here. Little areas of some more shadow. Got to be careful of light and shadow. Contrast of light and shadow is really what brings it forward. So you have to be a little careful how much light and shadow you're putting on some things, right? So, you know, it all needs shadow, but how dark is that shadow? And that's contrast. So be a little careful with that as you're building this forward. More shadow down in here. Always compare it against what you're doing here. This is the really good shadow. As a matter of fact, let's take some burnt sienna and some blue and a bit of red violet. This is one of the deepest, darkest shadows that I'm going to be able to create in this painting. And I want that right there in that shadow part of the river right back there. Right in there. Maybe some of it right along the edge. Let's push this rock back a bit. This rock, maybe some of it right along the edge of that rock. That's really where I want that real deep dark. And I'll have some of that for depth. I'll have some of that right up here. So now my eye can really see, and this is what my eye can really see the light and the dark of the painting as I develop it. Does that make sense? So, you know, what happens is you can get so dark back there, and so you need your eye to relate to a bit of it. So I'm going to put a rock into dark water right in here. Some of this will go back light again. This is just so I can see where that's going to be over here. Some of the reflections of the water I want right in here. So I'll just streak some of this through in here. Right, so we'll pull some of this in different ways, but yeah, that'll work. Okay, so as I go back up here to the top, I want to keep all of my trees really, really casual and stuff. So maybe just a bit of this dark and use just the edge of my brush here to help define a few shadows. But I want to keep them soft, so I'll touch them and then just pull through them there. A few more little bits, lights and darks up here. Maybe, I wanted to originally do some pine trees up here because I love those, but, I think they might be too distracting. So I'll just do some tree shapes up here, right like that. And light side, some of the yellows and greens here. Light struck sides here. Hitting some of those trees there. Lights, little bits of light hitting those, okay? And a bit of the shadow pulling down this side, so the light hits and then the shadows kind of take over here a little, because you got to always think, where's the light? So the light may hit the top here, but then as it gets down here, it's going to go back into shadow. And maybe a touch of that yellow oxide before it hits into that shadow, which is the deeper of the yellows, right? So you just really, it would be really difficult to paint that with Hansa and stuff. It would, but you might have a bit of that Hansa right up here. So I had a bit of Hansa, a bit of yellow in the light right up here. If we push a mark this way, so like that's right where the light is hitting it. Does that make sense? Light's hitting along the tops. And you're controlling the light through your painting, and that's where all of your interest is going to come from. Where that light is coming into that painting, right? So let's push this right up into the shadow there, maybe a bit, and down like that. So the viewer sees a bit of light hitting right up there at the top of that. Maybe it's a little grassy top up there, and it's just hitting it. Maybe there's a secondary one right there. And then it falls down, and push some of these trees over this edge here so that you have some coming in front of it. That little bank coming right through there, a little touch of light hitting on them. Just the ideas. A little bit of shadow here. There we go. That's pretty neat. Just something like that. Very casual here. I love the paintbrush casual like this. It's just so much fun. And, you have to, it takes a little bit to get used to just letting it go, and what happens. That takes a little bit to get used to. Let's just take a bit more little shadow here and there. Because the shadow is what really adds the interest. Because, your sky in a landscape sets the foundation for what you're doing, and it's the shadow that creates the interest. Here, so maybe some of these trees that are down here, you'd see the tree shapes, but they'll all be just in shadow, and this dark shadow is what's going to help them come forward in the painting. Here, right in there like that, so. And I know this, I have a reference photo over there. I'm not following it too close, but I've done these kinds of stuff so many times that I really don't need it too much. So hits there, see the light's going across hitting here. Light's going to hit here and then pull this deeper shadow through here. And he's going to be back into the light again right up in here. If everything works. Okay, so that works. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's take some of our blues, burnt siennas. We'll make some of our initial grays. And And I should probably do this with my big brush. I'm going to block in some colors here. Initial grays and stuff like that. Maybe a bit of yellow into that here. That'll set some of the initial grays. It's a little bit not quite warm enough, I think, for me. So I'm going to add a touch more yellow and burnt sienna here. That's better. I want this all mottled up here. Some more rocks right up here. We'll put in the light and shadow side in a minute. Pull some of the color down here. Let's push one of these rocks right in here. That's going to be good. We'll take it softly back in here so we don't. So it's going to go around the corner there. Maybe another one right up over here sitting in shadow around that corner going down. We're going to have a couple. I want a couple back up over here that the water goes around, and a couple right up over here, I think. So I'm creating this little canyon of rocks here. These aren't on my idea photo, so we'll just do it. Now, let's go into the little bit more shadow here. So I'll take some burnt sienna, some blue, but I want that rich. I love that rock that's really rich in burnt sienna. So I'm going to use that. This is your receding tone area. This isn't the shadow tone of the rock, it's the receding tone. So I like that right there. We'll put some more stuff on it as well. But we're going to have a receding tone area right here on this one. Right in there. So that big rock. So the receding area would be right down in here. Well, this whole area actually on this one's going to be in shadow. So we'll just put all that receding in on that one. Let's burnt, so heavy onto the burnt sienna. That's going to be the receding tone color. Receding area. So that would be all air. Everything to the right would be lit. Everything to the middle of these guys here would be receding tone. And then the shadow tone will be in the deepest areas yet. So we'll take burnt sienna and our blue. A little heavy on the burnt sienna. A little bit more blue. A little bit darker, cooler. This would be our shadow tones. Right back in here. Right in there like that. And they're not perfect right now because I have a lot of things I need to, color statements I need to make. So they're not perfect right now. Okay, so right in here, there like that. That works pretty good. Now, let's take some of this thinness out, and some of this will go right into the water. A beautiful water painter will carry those tones right into the water. I'll show you that. I'm going to use some extender. I'm going to just cast some of these tones right into the water. And you'll get that for a couple reasons. One is it can give you some transparency to make it look like, thin water or not very deep, but it also can carry reflections and other stuff. So, and good water will carry all of the tones around it. So now right up over here, I want all those sky colors, but I might right along the edge here take some of that real thin right there to help that. Now let's before I get going too far here, let's go ahead and put some of this back here. So we'll take, I'm going to grab some more white here because I'm going to use a lot of this. I just know it. And so we're going to get this sky color that's up over here, right? Are you done making noise there, Callie? My dogs. Yeah. My dogs love to paint with me in here, so you guys get to experience them too. The snoring, the everything. So a little bit of our blues, quinacridone, and the whites here, right? And that's the sky color. Let's just drag that right along here. Let that hit. This is going to be a rock right out there. Let some of this drag right through that, those browns and stuff. See that right into there? Let's not wipe out my guy too much, but we'll touch so I don't have to redraw him too much here, but a little bit right in there. Let's get even lighter, because as we change the angle, we pick up the back. We'll get a little lighter back there, and let's just carefully sneak that in. Then it's going to hit to the shadow here, right? So we'll touch that right in there kind of carefully. Working with the knife too, you can use the knife for that as well. There. And I just might do that because that looks pretty good. So let's just pick up a mottled edge. That has too much yellow in it right there. Mottled edge, some blues, and some of these lights. Let's come back here really carefully and just drag that light. Yeah, that's perfect. Right along that edge there, see? And then we'll pull down a bit more here, right like that. That's good. Maybe pull a touch of this. I don't want a complete straight line right there, so we'll just kind of push it up into the shoreline there a bit. And if you want to create like wind ripples and stuff, you just drag this across, and so you can make the highs and lows of wind and stuff like that that hits that. So that looks pretty good in there. Now let's deepen this. Quinacridone and the blues right in here. Now we're going to take some water into the shadows here, right up in here. And that might be a bit bright, so we'll add just a touch of our burnt siennas to that. Reflect those rock colors in there. There we go. Right down in there. That's a bit bright still. So let's go a little bit more blue and burnt sienna into that. Matter of fact, we could probably just take some of that blue and burnt sienna and just run it in there. Let a few little bits of that bright color come out there. Doesn't hurt anything. And some of this right along that edge. So here is the darker color. This is more of a shadow tone pulling right in there. And then I'll just bring those two together right through his hand. Right there. Some of that light. I'll go pull these back and forth a couple times till I get the look that I like. Here. Oh, that's good. So that was a little push and lift here. A little bit of the light here. But mostly some of that deeper shadow color. And you can, so I like to do that with a knife, and then sometimes I like to just take my brush like this and just softly pull back. Just one or two little strokes. You don't want it to do too much because you'll blend it. But just a soft little edge there. Let's get this tone little deeper blue right in there. So that pushes those rocks back in there. Here we go. Just like that, so that you can see it coming out and hitting into the light. That's what I want. And maybe just an angle of that medium, of that midground light coming through, picking up through here, like that. And sometimes I'll pull down. Pulling down gives you reflections and stuff, so, and it softens it. So I hit up in there, and I don't worry about that. But pull down. Let me rinse that brush out a bit. Here, I can always take a damp brush and take that off. See, that doesn't worry me. So I'll take that cleaner brush here and pull down. Wipe your brush, clean brush, pull down. And that will actually take some of these green. Let's even take a little water. Sometimes when it's dry, I take my brush with a little water. It's a good thing. And I'll run it through the acrylic and then I pull it down into the water, see? And it will carry the green right down in the water and make it look just like you know what you're doing here with pulling those shadows down there. And then if I blur anything like I've hit right up there a bit, I'll just push a little more color back in to hide some of that. And I've got this nice, softer little bit coming in there, see? And that works pretty nice like that. I like to use that method. You know, I use the water to help you move sometimes. So water is your solvent. And these acrylics that we designed are designed not to dry up or to start to harden for, well, it takes 28 hours, really, for them to kind of harden up. So they're designed so that you can manipulate them with water even after they've tacked up. So they're designed to do a lot of artistic techniques, and that's why I like to use them. It's what we designed them for, to use them like that. Okay, let's pull just a little bit more of that light right up through like that. There we go. Just a bit of it. So it's got a tiny touch of edge of the sun hitting there. Edge of that sun hitting that. That's good, pulling forward. So now you can see the depth that we are creating in here, right? And it's those darks and stuff there that really create that depth. And, so I really want to make sure, like, I get that nice little clear shadow right back there. And that's what creates that little corner and that stuff going around there. And then we can take a touch of our lights and just drag down like maybe some of those little trees right there, hit the light, and that's all you need. But you need that dark right there against that, and then you can add those little ideas of the trees right in front of it. Okay, so let's get back up over here towards the rocks, okay? And I'll show you what I'm going to do with the rocks and then the water, and then we'll come back and paint the guy, so because I don't want to take up too much time on this thing. So let's come back. I want to express some burnt sienna, really nice burnt sienna, some deeper. We're going to paint this in broken color. You've seen me so many times paint broken color. Broken color, burnt siennas and blues are good receding tone colors that I have over here. And I might just, so this color here, red and blue also make beautiful rock tones as well. Nice gray rock tones here. Some of these, all these blues, this is all really good rock tones right in there. They always do. They always make really nice tones. Some of this burnt sienna in here. Some of this just makes just nice tones to touch onto your rocks, over here into this side and stuff over there. So, and I'll take some of that tone and touch it up over here, but these are going to be warmer tones over there. So what I'm going to be doing is crossing my tones quite a bit. So there's my mid-tone. I'll come over here, even in this blue area. Let's warm it up. Some yellow, some burnt sienna, and stuff right into these blues here. Let the yellows overtake the blues. The blues will help grade a bit, but these will be your warmer, light-struck rock tones right in here, okay? And, of course, we'll do all kinds of variations of them, but that's what'll come on, and I'll push and pull like this, and heaviness of it and lightness of it here. Light touches with the knife, just kind of dragging the knife around there and create, this is the light this will be the light struck area, so I might come back, add a little bit more light. We need to, there's a broken edge of the rock right here that pulls down this way, so we're going to need to express that in there, right? So, put a little bit more light, white into that. That's a pretty rock color. Heavier. There, right in there like that. Really comes forward there, right? And you got to remember though that this will dry a value down, a value darker, so we have to plan for that. A little more brown, just a touch into that back one. So touch more burnt sienna, touch more yellow, add some white to it. Slightly different back here. A little bit different here, right in there, right, that's good. And you can also do this with the shadows, okay, the same type of thing. Add some of the coolness to the shadows, get some of the different looks there. Use the tip of your knife and just kind of sketch and draw and push, but a lot of color. And so I drag it down there a little far. What I do is I lift it back off, right, like that, and I've got my other rock back up in front, and then I can restate that. Maybe even a little bit of this bluey violet here. Right back up here. Right like that, this rock back up in front. But I do like to cross some of those tones. So in other words, I'll take some of that rock tone, push it into that one right there. See? And then I'll drag. So we got to get some darker versions. And sometimes I'll just take this over to our other color or other version and push a bit of it over here. You can, you know, as it mixes with this other color there, it darkens down a little bit, but it gives a commonality to your rocks, right? And that's the whole ticket there. So a little blue. I like the green with some of it sometimes, especially in receding tones before it goes to a deep shadow. I like some of that green in there, or we can have a tiny bit of violet here, hitting over here. And violet in the green gives you another kind of a beautiful gray here. Touch of burnt sienna. So I'll play these colors and start touching them around here and working these edges like that. That's what I'm going to do, back and forth. And I'll keep, when I get down to this other side over here, to the more shadowy tones, that's what I use on these other rocks that are around the corners over here. I don't use any of the light tones. The lightest tone that I'll set in there is the receding tone, right? And I might, now this up over here is an entire rock face as well. So we can just simulate the rock face here, because this is all in shadow, so you can't see too much going on in there. So we'll just emulate here some of the rock face here, some verticals, a couple horizontals, but mostly verticals. Rocks and trees are all joining together over there. So I'll build some of that in there. But I'm going to continue, and you've seen me paint rocks like this a lot, and so I'll come back, I'll use my brush sometimes and push in smaller little touches as I start to paint the rocks. And there's a really, really good one that I did with rocks, and a lot of you commented on it that you really loved those rocks. It was one of the Westerns called Almost There. So you can look at those particular rock shapes. I really liked those as well. And so you can look to those for some inspiration. But I'll take some of my medium, receding tone color over here, and I'll use this to help recede some edges. And then I'll come in like burnt sienna and blue, a nice darker one here, maybe a little bit of violet into it. Get it really quite dark here. Some of this dark, it could be even more burnt sienna. Here, really dark, burnt sienna blue here. And I'll use this for like deep rock edges here. And I'll start putting in some of the deeper shadows that I might see into this rock, because I want this rock to have a lot of interest. And then once I paint those, then I'll go back and work lights back and forth like this, adding some of the broken color to this rock here. And so some of the shadow goes up. So you put in shadows and lights and midtones back and forth. Sometimes a little more green into the rock. Sometimes a little more violet or burnt sienna into the rock. Sometimes just scrape over the rock like this to create some interest in it. But there's some shadow, like a broken edge there. And a lot of really soft burnt sienna colors down this side here. We'll pull back up on that. So I'll go back and forth. I'll let it dry up and put some more in. I'll come back into these and do the same thing over in here again. And then I'm going to paint the rocks over here on the front exactly the same way. Okay? So I'll go back in exactly the same way. And to help you sometimes to see that, maybe before I'm not going to finish the water, but let's just take a bit of our burnt sienna and blue, thin it out here, some extender here, because we'll get some of this burnt sienna into the water here. Let's pull some of this down and carry some of this through, so you'll get the feeling of the water that's going to come in here. A little bit of violet and white. Let's come up over here. Blue, violet, and white. Okay, maybe a bit of the burnt sienna in there, a little softer. We'll push some of this back, just softly, back and forth. Sometimes some nice vertical strokes, which calms the water. Horizontal strokes gives it its movement, but you can just start to see the water coming in here, right? And so sometimes taking away the white will let you see these rocks a lot easier. So I'll do that right now and putting some of this in. It's not perfect, but it gets me a little closer to what I want to do in the painting, so I can see it a little bit better. Get rid of some of that white. So now we can see what's going on here. And we'll put those in. Let's take some of this burnt sienna and blue back up over here to the other side of him. We'll have some rocks right in here. I'm not sure the shape of the rocks yet. But let's take some blue, a little bit of violet, and some white. And we'll grab a bit of this gray into there. Just a nice medium blue. Just streak that through. We'll grab a bit more light into that. Right up here. And see, I don't worry about blending them together. I never do in water. I overlap each other a bit and stuff, but I don't ever like blend the water in together. I want Into the Sky has a lot more blue-green, so as I go up to the lighter versions, I like to blue-green it just a bit more. Even though we put some violet in there, it's still a little bit more blue-green than what you see in the light areas or the shadow areas back up in here. So here we get a bit more light right up here, right up next to him. And so that rock will go right there, and then, yeah, that'll be good. And that light might extend over here a bit more, because we're going to hit him with the light, which means this will be a little lighter. We can push that in a little later, but I'll hit that shadow in here. So this will probably be more light here, right along in here. That'll work. Right up in here. And it gives you, just by doing that and working these through here, gives you an idea of what we're going to do. And so if I take some of this, and just, this is how simple it is. So I'll pull some of this light through like this, okay? Then I'll take some of the burnt sienna, thin, burnt sienna extender here. The shadow colors of this water, or this rock. Let's go a little burnt sienna, a little bit of blue. Keep this a little cleaner. Let's go up here. A little bit of blue. And just pull down. This will push this rock color right into the water. Then pull across and you get that blurriness of the rock, right? And then where it's going to touch into the water, that edge of that rock gets even darker. So I'm going to go through and paint this. This will take a little bit. I'll give it about 20 minutes or so. Working these rocks back and forth a few times. Getting real dark. And I got to get some more burnt or blue into that. Here. But quite dark back down in there. More blue. Maybe a bit of violet. And then work the tones again through this part of the painting. Here again, some of this can pull down into the shadow, into the reflection here, into the water there. That'll be good. We'll put some of that right back in here, okay? And then we'll come back and I will work on the man up here, the fisherman, and a little bit more on the water. But I'll just paint these rocks, just exactly what I'm doing here. I'll just paint them a few more times. And I might block in the guy here so we can see him a little easier. And then we'll come back and add details and paint him up a bit more. Okay, so there you get the main shapes of it in there. But I'm going to add a few more little things in here. So give me about 20 minutes or so. I'll work on that and we'll come back and we'll drop that little guy in there. Yeah, I like that depth back there. Here we go. I'll be back. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so had a little lunch too. I decided to let that dry really well and look at the values. I came in and added just a little bit more lighter color here, some with a touch more burnt sienna in it. But I've got a good receding side. I can deepen the shadow a little bit more, that I know, and in and around here. And I got a few more little rocks here and stuff. So let's now work on the water and the fisherman. First we'll put in the fisherman. So I'm going to go to a smaller, this is a smaller number 4 fusion. It's not, excuse me, not a fusion, it's a synthetic filbert. It's one that we make that is synthetic. It's a little bit smaller. It's better for drawing and stuff sometimes than the fusion. And so I'm going to take some burnt sienna, some yellow, some white. I'll make that nice, beautiful tan hat he has. I have one pretty similar to it here, and we'll just put in the shape. And it's going to be small. I'm going to work him as a impressionism, where you've seen me paint the small fishermen and small figures and stuff before, where I paint them as light and shadow. That's what I work at first, is light and shadow. That's how I tend to do it, and then we'll add from there. But it's you started out light and shadow. So I'll put some of that in that's a little bit more tan to make that beautiful tan that he has in his pants. I'll add a little green to that, and that makes this a perfect tan. Let's not go as light as we can, just down a couple values, and let's just put some color in here and skip this around a bit. And I'll even drag it into the water just a touch here. So, and again, like I've painted the others, light and shadow, which means I'm not going to do any details. I'm going to do some transitional halftones, some halftoning and stuff, but most of it is going to be kept really simplistic here. And then the viewer gets to see what it is. Let's take some burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, which makes this a darker brown. We'll put this in right up underneath here by the back of his hair. Maybe just burnt sienna and a touch of white for a soft idea of a flesh here. So I'll just push in a little bit of that. Some of that can go right up to his hand, which will be right up in here. I've painted through my drawing, so I'll add that back again. Here, right up there. And again, this first go is just to set some colors. That's all I'm doing. And then we'll go from there. Let's take some of that beautiful tan, add a little bit of our light blue from our sky to that. And we're going to go more of a white shirt, but it's a real light gray to begin with here. So, and again, very simplistic shapes, more sketched on than anything else. And then he's going to have his backpack here, which has a darker gray. So we'll just darken the gray. Beautiful grays or burnt siennas, reds, blacks, blues. And beautiful darker gray here on the side of his. And again, I'm going to keep this really simplistic here. And now the red, I don't think I'll make it quite as bright, so I'll add some burnt sienna to it. Not quite as bright as what he has. I don't, because it's isolated into the painting, and I want it to come out kind of red, but I don't want it to be basically, to overwhelm the entire painting here. So we'll just keep it simple here. And let's add a bit of his other arm over here. And we have just a spot of that. Now, I'm going to help him loosen up a bit. I'll take some blue, burnt sienna, some extender here, white. Some of our colors that we'll use into the water and everything here, and we'll work this all around him and maybe into the edges a bit so that he becomes a little bit softer looking. So run this right into the edges everywhere around him. And edges are so important to what we do. They are the foundational shapes of what it is that we do. So, I'm constantly looking at edges and stuff. So I just want to run this in, blur the edges a bit, takes away, make sure you have no holidays or anything like that. So it takes away some of his detailing. Okay, light and shadow. So now we'll take burnt sienna and green. That's a little too much green. Nice dark, kind of brown color, which works really well with what he has here. And we'll set some of the shadow tones here. The wrinkles in his pants and stuff like that. Some of the shadow tones that come down this side here. And around, wrapping around, just kind of fill in some of the shapes here. There we go. We can even use this. This is a beautiful color. We can even use this down the left top side of his hat here. It's hard to tell on that reference photo, but there's a little bit of his hat shows up on the front side. And again, I don't want to get wrapped up in a whole bunch of little details, but yeah, just a little bit under there, And let's just add a touch of white to this. this will create a half tone here. So I have light and shadow, and now I'm just going to come through with some half tones. And again, I'm not going to worry about blending these off. That's just a little dark, so I'm going to lighten it just a touch. But these are like little half tones here that stay, and they soften the transitions. Now this one leg right here doesn't have like a soft transition. It really doesn't. It kind of comes quite sharp between the light and dark. And I wipe this out a bit, so I'm going to just restate this. I'll go back and forth a few times to state him here, but again, it's mostly light and shadow. But I'll put some half tones in, like right in here, cast shadow back, half tone on that leg here, and a little bit of the straps or something else going on there. Blur it out a bit. We're not going to get worried about a whole bunch of details on stuff. Let's lighten this back up again. Getting back up towards the light a bit again. Probably could go just a touch lighter, but that's real close. Here. There, I got that a little bit off in the shape. So I'll go back and forth a few times. Here. There we go. That's better. Bit of the light down here. Light and shadow. It's so I'm not worried about, and sometimes when I have a big Western and I'm painting a figure in that, you'll see me do a little bit of half toning work and stuff like that, but this guy is so small, really, and I can just use the impressionistic mark, and and I don't need to get wrapped up in too much detail. One of the preferred ways I like to paint. There we go. Yeah. Just like that. And this leg crosses in front of that one, so this will give you an idea how I'm doing it. Then I start to focus in on where those shadows actually are, how they form and go around on him. Here. Like that. So, and we start to, now it's just a little bit wider. This is kind of in a big area right here on him. And so, back and forth a few times. Couple of light little marks like this as the pockets on his pants there. There we go. Like that. Very good. Let's take some of this slightly darker up here to the top. We'll drop some right around his arm. Some of the wrinkles that are in his shirt here as he's reaching up. Then we'll come back here, add a tiny bit of blue back up to his shirt color here, a little bit lighter. Model some of that around. And again, I paint over some of the shadows and then back into the, into the lights, over some of the shadows, and then I'll go back and restate some of the shadows again and come back into the lights again. Back and forth a few times as I refine the shapes here. But I'm not blending. I'm taking individual marks. This is light and shadow painting. It's a little bit different. It's really great in impressionism, in optical blending type techniques. Which is what I'm doing here. So it's up close they look horrible, but you get back and it gets more and more realistic, as the optics take over. So it's called optical blending. So just looking at the shadow and the light here. There we go. And so I want to, and a lot of times with the small little guys or small people like this that I paint, I simplify as much as I can the mark, so, and that's the thing about painting figures. You're not painting a portrait or anything. You're painting a figure. So you simplify your marks as much as you can. So break it down into just a few values and paint those. Right? All right, let's get a tiny bit lighter flesh tone here. Let's just put it right here. Burnt sienna and a little bit of white. And let's just touch that light right to the front right there of him. Let's touch that light right up here onto his hand where he's holding that reel right there. And I got that extra little mark right there I should take out. Again, we'll paint some of the blues back into him and stuff. And one of the things I want to do is let's add a little more highlight here, but add the blue into him, the water reflecting back into him. So we want to do that as well. That's a little too light. Go. So see, I'll put that back in now. One of the last, and you see me say in other videos, I don't really like to leave with the light, but sometimes when I'm painting small figures like this, I don't like to leave with the dark, but sometimes when I'm painting small figures like this, I leave with the dark, and it really works. So I'll probably leave this with the dark. So let's just put on the idea of his backpack here, right? Some dark here up onto this side. Little wrinkle marks and stuff coming through, right? And this bit, he's wearing this pack. Fracture sometimes those lines. That's what looks the best. Add a little touch of that deeper shadow. Some of this shadow that I'm just using on that backpack can come into here as well. That provides harmony into the little figure. He carries some of the same colors here, which happens. There we go. Just like that. And I'm going to take out just a little more of that blue. Here, I got his hand over here on this other side arm, really kind of too big. So I'll take some of this out. It's just a bit bright. Take some of it out. There, okay. So, I'll go through, and I'll do this several times, going through him, slowly refining and adding little marks and stuff like this as I develop him, and he will slowly come to life here. Let's get a little light for that front of his hat here. There. Put in some of that shadow there. Here. He's coming along. He needs to go through. So, depending on the size, and he's a little bit bigger than what I've done before, so I might go through him a couple more times like this, light and shadow each time. Couple more times, but like this time coming through just the tiniest bit of blue into that beige there, and it'll look a little different. But again, I just visualize it all light and shadow. That's all it is. Light and shadow. Go. And so, yeah, but I'll do this a couple times, guys, till I refine him to where I like. And each time, each mark I make is a little less and a little less, till I get exactly the way, as much as I want him to pop off that surface and show up a little better. There we go. A little bit of light. Here a bit. Down in there. And then repeat. Light and shadow. There. You can see how that just really jumps off with that shadow. And that's what I want to get in some of these other areas here. So, a little more light. And then to redress that shadow. And like I say, I will most likely, the shadow is most likely what I'll be leaving somewhat. So once I get most of that in, then I'll start adding some little bits of details and marks here that will start adding a touch more detail to him. Slightly different little shadow color there. Right in there. So you get light and shadow. So this time I have just a little bit more blue in it. And I might put some of that up here on the backpack. Maybe a touch of it right in here on the hat. Right? Some of it here. Dropping down his arm. Right there. But he is really nice. He's raised his arm up, so on the lower side there is really hitting the light quite nice. And the other thing is you can use your knife. Your knife puts on little edges on figures really nice. I've showed you that in one of the last ones. So you can draw with your knife. This brush is an older one, and even though the synthetics have really nice tips on them, it's a little bit older, so it's not quite as defining as it could be. So I might use a knife to set a few little edges, but yeah, that's good. Right down, that's down in there. So you see, that's coming pretty good. Let's lighten his face a bit. Right up here. There we go. His face a bit. That's pretty good. Maybe a touch more on this backpack though. A little bit of red maybe. Does cause him to stand out. I'll look at it here and then make that decision. There. Let's burnt sienna and blue, darker drawing color. So we'll some of the stuff on his backpack here. There we go. I've got his arm probably a little thick right there and just a touch, so I'll take care of that. I do also want to give him a bit, I want his hand coming up here in the front to hold part of the line, so we'll do that. And see, now what I do is I start looking at little detail things. So his arm's going to come forward there. Let's take a bit of our blue, tone it just a touch here for the water. We'll paint the water again in just a minute, but and all of that will correct, but just to thin this up a bit. Here we go. There we go. There. He sets in there a lot better. But a few more little things, light shines, that kind of stuff can go on. You can put that gray, a bit more gray stripe down the side of his backpack there. Here, again, it's just more interest there. There, like that. Little colors, little marks. You know, you start using smaller little marks for this stuff. And like I said, I really like to use the knife. Let me just show you, like right in here, I'll use the knife, the edge of the knife here to draw that. And it gives a really nice fractured edge, which increases the realism of it. See, there's a little fractured edge there. And so I can draw some of that color down the sides like this, and it puts it on a little more fractured than what the brush does, which that fracturing gives it a little bit more realism to it. So, and it works really nice. A little bit of an edge here. This is the Liquitex number 5 knife, and I really like it because I could use it small like this to draw little points here to draw little interest. And see, all of those little marks there now just give so much interest to it. It's amazing. See, just zoom. And that just looks so much more real. See, all that little stuff going on there. And especially with the knife. So you'll find a lot of artists will use the knife for little things like this, putting in little light edges here. You use your paint not real loose, kind of stiff, and it just gives a little fractured highlight to it. That's quite nice. Let's mix some of that light up again here, but kind of stiff. Don't thin it out. And it doesn't always go on real well. Sometimes you got to do it a couple times because, you know, you're using stiffer paint and it comes off a little different. Right, so there's a little light to the front, and we'll use this edge right here and just draw that little light edge right like that. See that this, It's too bad it didn't bend around the right shape. Whoops. So, yeah, I'll just take that off here. Just take a little water, take that off. Maybe I can just do that and lift it up. I want that. There's a tiny bit of dark. It's hard to see on the photo, but there's a tiny bit of dark right up there. There, that's better. And darken his face just a touch. There. And just look for small little lines. There we go. That looks pretty good. Then the last thing I'm going to be doing here is just going through the water again. And there's all kinds of ways to paint the water. I've showed you 1,000 different ways. But I'm going to put some extender on it. Sometimes I use the extender and the open medium together because I like how it slides along the surface. So you will see, go back and look at all the different ways in which I paint water. And my favorite way is the extender and open medium, but I don't do it always the same. So I have some really nice Oliprema here, so I'm going to put on some extender, wipe it down just a bit. And I'm going to start out with some shadow, which is my burnt sienna in blue. Let's come back in and we'll add some shadow, just some light shadows right in here. Light is coming from the left, so some of this will shadow that way. And we'll push some of this shadow right up in here. I'll let some of it granulate a little bit. Right up underneath him, there'll be a shadow, and some of his colors will reflect into that shadow too. We'll put a reflection of him down into the water there. Some of this will go real deep up in here, right up along that edge in there. We'll pull some of that down. I'm going to keep the water, though, really simplistic. Doesn't need that much, so... Right, we'll take some of this, thin it out, maybe a little bit more blue, sometimes just a tiny bit of white, just to give a different look or a little opacity to it. Here, a little bit of violet. Here, oh, that's a pretty color. Let's look at what that looks like in there. That's pretty. And see, I just lightly glaze this on and let some of those streaks happen. You can calm it by pulling up and down like this. So that once you have some of that, you can pull up and down, and that gives a different feel to the water. It gives these kind of reflections and stuff to the water, which work really nice. Once I have, let me put a little bit more of that on, maybe a little bit of different, slightly blue and white in here as well. But once I have some of that blue on there, let's go in with a little burnt sienna and a little yellow, and I'll just come right down here, right? And we can glaze this lightly into the water down here. We'll just work back and forth, pull down with some of it, and then across. That just glazes some of the color. Now, I'm going to actually add movement to the water here in just a bit, but this is basically the calm water. You can add some of these colors right down in here so that they are pulling down from the other parts of the water there. Let's take some light. I'm just going to take it right into this so it tones it a bit. Let's take some lighter blue, add some extender to this. Blue, white, and that's a pretty color. Plays well against the sky. Everything I do right now, I'm watching against the sky. I'll pull some of this down and stuff. Extender. We're doing it a little different than we've done before. You know, I usually slide some open medium over this and pull it, but we're keeping it thinner this time. Okay, so a little bit different, right? few little streaks here. Now, one of the reasons why I'm keeping it a little different is I'm going to put some movement into the water in just a minute. So I'm keeping it a little stiffer. Let's go just a touch lighter. Maybe a bit more of the blue over here. Touch lighter. Right up in here. Right up where his arm was right there. That's pretty good. Okay. And we want to pull this in here so he doesn't look like he's outlined. So we first incorporate him back into the water there. See, so he's got a good ebb and flow of this color going around him. So he doesn't look like he's outlined here. And then, yeah. Then, so a really good way, we're going to add some of the movement to the water here, is to use some of the open medium. I'll show you that. And open medium is thicker and it's translucent, transparent. I'm going to put some right up here. This was the color I used before. Now I like in that photo, I like some of the more violety colors here. So I'll add some blue and some violet here together. I love those. That violety color. Let's add a bit of white to this. Take a look at that. I love that color. Let's first come over here. We'll add some open medium right over here. About 1 to 1. Check it to make sure it is mixed well and that it slides really well and it's slightly translucent. And then what we do is this. We set this down. And this could be a bit lighter, but I'm going to continue this for a minute. But also, because you can see it's making a color on there. So as long as it's making a color, I'll go ahead and use it. And I'll slide it here. And this makes the little bit of movement ripples in the water here. So you can see that color happening there. And I'm pulling side to side here. Right like that. You can blur it off a bit here. But I like it to have these little fractured edges. I want a little bit over here. Right in here. That will just, see, and you can pull across a bit. You could use a brush to soften some of that. But it's putting in some of the movement of the water. Then we'll lighten it up and do it again. So some of this slides like this. And what this really is different reflections of the sky here. So let's just pull that right here. So it adds a little bit of this movement here. Back and forth like that. It's really kind of pretty color. Some of it right up here in that transition from light to dark. Right in there. Now, let's lighten it up. Okay, maybe change the blue just ever so slightly. Maybe a touch more blue so it goes a little bit more blue-green. Lighten it up a little bit more here. And sometimes I'll leave it mottled like this. Let's take some of this over here and just add some open medium. A lot of open medium this time, because I don't want this to be completely opaque here. I just want to slide it a little bit at a time. Matter of fact, I'm going to add some more open medium over there to this here. Better to have too much than not enough, because this is really light, so it can opaque something really easy. So, right, so we know that when we add a lot of white to something, it has a danger of painting out everything, so you got to be careful. Okay, so now we'll come in here. Oh yeah, that's pretty. See how you get this translucency to it, see? And it creates those white little ripples and stuff, those light ripples here. And I want some of it to blur into that, right in there. See? like that. Lots of open medium. So it... Now, see, if you get too much, see, you just wipe your knife like this and lift it right back off. Push it around a little bit. It'll move on you really nice because it's got a lot of really slippery medium in it. And you can, if you get too much of something, like too white right there, just add a little blue to it here. Just like that. See, sometimes pull it down a little bit or tap it. That'll give you a little different movement in the water. There we go. Try not to keep it on the rocks there, Dave. But I'll take some of this light edge like this right up against the rock. Some of it pulling the back away from the rock there. Right like that. And you can take a clean brush here, take my 3/4 inch with my clean brush and pull through to soften it a bit. But, some of those little burbles and stuff you want to leave on there. So, that and a little bit right here. Up here in the front. Some of the little lines along the edge of the rocks here. Like that. Maybe that's too light there. Just take it down a little bit. Add a little bit of that other blue in there. And that'll take some of it down. Let's add a few, maybe a little more shadow into it. Over here, a little bit of that movement. See, it creates that white water movement there. I want to put some underneath him as well. Because water's going down this way and stuff, you would have a bit of white water hitting him, or a little bit of the disturbed water right around him. And right here as well. Maybe even a bit of the light. Not too much, but a bit of the light. You could, put a bit of his transparent leg and stuff in there too. Pull that through. I've showed you how to do transparency and stuff in there, so you can do that as well. But just a little bit, maybe a mark or two right up there to say that's where the front of the water is. Let's put a little bit more right in here. So I was originally going to flow the water this way, but I like it flowing the other way down. Let's just add a few little bits. Here, you can pull down and blur across. All of that movement is really nice. Work some different values in there. Here. Right up towards him. Like that. See, that just makes all pretty movement in the water. That's a little blue there, so let's break some of that up right there. And so you could pull like this, like it's going right into the shadow, and you go, oh, maybe I pulled that too much into the shadow. But you get those, as it's running out, you get these little fractured edges like this that happen. Let's fracture that again. Just a little bit on your knife. Start pulling and then let it fracture. And if you get too much, that gets, say it paints out some of the stuff that you just did there, because the paint underneath there is dry. Just take a little bit of water with that and pull it back out. And like in my case there, I will take a bit of the blue and a bit of the yellow here, which was the color, pulls some of that down too to increase that reflection right in there, that color. But I do like a little bit of it there because that little spark. So I'm going to tap it, take most of it off, and just a real light hit that edge there. Real light. Just run that through. So you can even just run some of that through. But you need that so that there destroys that that look of that reflection a little bit. So you need that pull down. See, you need this pull down. See how that creates the reflection again? You need that pull down to create the reflection. Let's put a little more burnt sienna right in there. See, you try to... reflections are, of course, the color that's cast in it and stuff, but generally just a little darker as well. So, and if you give that just a second to dry up, it'll be a lot easier. So, just a second. But let's just dry this on the knife a little bit. Drag it over your surface a bit here so it's a little bit drier, and then it'll fracture more for you. Here, like that. But I want some of those fractures there to go right into him. So I'm going to paint right into him, and then I'll take it off of him. Here. So I want it to go right into him. And I'll just take it off. So it doesn't look like I've painted around him, if that what makes sense. I don't want to paint around him. So, but that's kind of fun. And so you can decorate it up. I will probably go over him just let's fracture this a bit. Yeah, a little bit more white water fracture right in there. See, that just creates some more of that movement of that water right there. And it's how much you want to put on. Some water you can tap in like this, and that gives it even more movement. That's up to you. I'll drag this just one more little time here. Just a bit. To say we did it. Right in there. Sometimes, off of a rock or something like this, you can build a little light like this, which is quite nice to do. Right like that. Take some of the dark and move that in. So, there we go. It generally puts in nice movement into the water there. How much you want to have, it's up to you. If you want everything softened out, just brush through it, and it'll soften it all out and stuff. So, let's go back. So you can decide on that, okay? That's up to you. Let's go back here, and I do want to put a touch more white on him every once in a while and build that back up, that shoulder area and stuff, so a little bit more. I'll put a final photo in so you can see finally what, those of you that are in the membership, I'll put a nice little final photo so you can see what I finally decided on him, how much I'm going to give him. Here. And but now let's go up, and this 10 flat that I have is pretty new, so it's got a pretty nice edge on it here. So I think I'll use it, burnt sienna and a little yellow, a little white, nice kind of brownish color here. And I'm going to use this to kind of give him the edge of his pole here. And so when you do that, like I did that, and it is not quite perfect right up there. So I'll take just some water in it and drag through and extend it and thin it out to where it needs to be there. And then I'll take it off his hand so it goes into his hand. And then, a lot of times what I'll do is that, he's actually fly fishing and stuff here, so he has kind of a bright luminescent yellow fly line and stuff to it, and so you can do that, or a light yellow or white, and I'll thin it out a bit, a little Hansa, a little yellow here, maybe a little yellow oxide, some water here, a little light yellow here. And a lot of times I use my knife thin. This is almost an inky consistency here. And so I use so actually, let's do something here. So I looked at that. I actually should bend his pole probably a little bit more. So let's take that back off there. And just like that, say goodbye. And go back to that lighter brownish color here. Let's bend his pole just a little bit more. Yeah, that's better. And I got just a little bit of a haze right here from that. I'll just take a little more water and take it off. Make sure you use a clean paper towel, because I've done that before and then drug more color through it here. That's better. And then I'll bend it just a bit more, and then I'll just drag this over here. There we go. That's better. I don't want to make it look like he's caught a monster. But then we'll take the light here, and this is going to pull right down. And I usually just do like this, and I let it hit and miss, just like that, through there. And it gets that nice little bit. And then I'll curve some of this down in a line, maybe a couple of places here. It comes back down and around through his hand here. So he's pulling down with his hand right here, so it's got to go into his hand. And again, so you put it on like that, and then when you want to drag it and fin it, take a bit of water with it and just drag it. And then you'll make it more of a solid line, if that's what you want to do. I like the hit and miss of the fracturing of it as well. So to me, that looks really neat. But we could, so see, I could take just a bit of the water, run it right along that edge, and see, it will slowly draw some of that together. And you can start to bring some of it together there, and you get some really nice looks to it there. And maybe you put a little touch of that lighter yellow right in there. A few other little places right along the edge of the line, depending on how much detail you want to give it. Maybe a little touch of dark right here and right on the bottom there. So, yeah. And then if you want to make the fish splash out of the water, a little bit of your light blue here, touch of white. You can, I like the knife. The knife is my favorite. I'll just create a little splash right in there. And then when I do, so I put it on there, and I mean, sometimes you're like really lucky you get it perfect the first time. But to me, I never really get it and stuff. So I take some water and another brush, and I just lift it off, and we'll create a bit of a splash right there, right? And you can make the fish coming out of water like they do, and all of that stuff. That's all up to you. All detail that you can do, more detail you can do. I'll just splash that a bit here. There we go. He's fighting him right there. He's got a fish on and fighting him. So other ones, I have them fishing. This time we have a fish on, right? And I'll put a little bit more white right in there on him. That's good. So, and I will probably lighten up just a few areas here and there. And, but overall, that's not too bad. So that's a really great technique, though, to draw it and then take a damp brush and pull through it. You know, I do a lot of rigging on ships. I've showed you different ways to rig ships and all that kind of stuff. But something like that just works really well. And if it skips, that's really good. Then you take that nice sharp, it should be kind of a newer fusion where it is with a little bit of water and drag it. And so then you still get highlights and you get the shadows of it and stuff that work really nice as well. So there you go. There's a nice one for you, okay? Hope you enjoyed it, okay? So now we're ready to start my Western. So I got that all done. He's right around the corner there. Some of the photos are there. I'm going to do that. Those over on the Paint It Simply channel, I'm going to put a new rose up probably tomorrow. And then I'm going right into filming my Western. And if you're on the Academies of Art, our free Facebook page, you can go over there and I've posted some of the stuff of how I'm doing the big Western, and so you can follow along there, and you can get the photos, do all that kind of stuff over there. So we're talking about it over there. So anyway, and if not, I'll see you guys on the next video right here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We appreciate that. And if you want to see more of landscapes, florals, whatever, you just let me know. I'm painting them all, and we go by how many people watch and how many people request, okay? So just let us know, okay? Thanks very much for joining me, guys. I'll see you on the very next one in just a few days, okay? All right. Bye-bye.